My sister maliciously destroyed a disabled student's expensive property, and I have never been more proud of her. My sister Lena stood in the center of the administration office, jaw clenched. 4 different cameras caught you, Superintendent Rothbart, all showing the exact same thing. You took a steel wrench to Felix Kern's bionic arm. You are facing serious prison time. Lena remained absolutely silent. Everyone at Horizon Tech knew Lena and Felix were inseparable childhood best friends. Then, the summer before sophomore year, Felix lost his entire right arm in a horrific wakeboarding accident on Lake Travis. When he returned, everything changed. He completely cut Lena out of his life. He blocked her account and ignored her in the halls. No argument, no closure. He just erased her. Lena was devastated, which eventually curdled into resentment. Students heard her venomous hallway complaints. He uses his missing limb like a VIP pass. She'd snap. She said awful, spiteful things that made her look like a jealous monster. So when Felix opened the robotics lab at 7:30 a.m. on Thursday and found his $22,000 scholarship-winning prosthetic smashed with Lena sitting nearby, nobody questioned it. She destroyed it out of spite. The local police arrived shortly after. This wasn't a school issue anymore. Listen to me, the lead detective said. You are looking at malicious destruction of property and felony sabotage. That carries a mandatory sentence, especially against the disabled student. Lena stared at the floor. Tell us why you did it, he pressed. Nothing. I shoved past the front desk secretary into the room. She wouldn't do something like that. You're her brother, Ruth snapped. Wait in the hall. I don't care, I argued. She wouldn't ruin his life, not after how he treated her. Roth rubbed his temples. Felix spent 14 months building that arm for the MIT showcase. She smashed it. Something is deeply wrong with her. A detective shoved me toward the hallway. A crowd of students had gathered by the windows. Lena spoke up. This is insane. Lena talks trash, sure, but she cries over roadkill. She's not violent. The cameras don't lie, another kid fired back. She's obsessed with him. Roth turned back to my sister. Last opportunity. Give a statement, or you're leaving in handcuffs. Lena finally lifted her head. Her cheeks were completely soaked, but not from fear. Ask him about the lithium bypass, she whispered. What? Ruth asked. Felix, ask him why he bypassed the thermal regulators on the neural battery pack. He was maximizing grip strength for the expo. No, he wasn't, Lena choked out, her voice breaking. If you bypass those regulators and connect the primary node to the chest sensors, the battery doesn't power the hand. It creates a closed circuit. The room fell dead silent. I looked closely at my sister. I noticed the dark, heavy circles under her eyes. The way she had been staying up until 3 a.m. every single night, frantically typing. Lena, I said softly. What did you find? She broke down. He was going to fry himself, on stage, during the live demonstration. He's been posting on an anonymous coding forum for 6 weeks about how he can't handle the pressure of being the inspirational crippled kid anymore. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket and slammed it down. I still have his old cloud password. I saw the altered schematics he uploaded on Tuesday at 11:42 p.m. If he strapped that on tomorrow, it would have sent 400 volts straight into his heart. The detective stopped writing. I couldn't override the software, Lena sobbed. So I broke into the lab and smashed the hardware. I destroyed it so he couldn't use it. She pointed a shaking finger toward the inner office, where Felix was waiting. He froze me out because he couldn't stand me looking at him with pity. He pushed everyone away so nobody would stop him. I let him think I hated him so I could watch his accounts without him getting suspicious. The lead detective took the flash drive. We need to speak with Felix. The heavy oak door to the inner office clicked shut behind the lead detective, leaving Lena, Superintendent Roth, and me in a suffocating silence. Outside the glass partition, the murmurs of the gathered students died down into an uneasy hum. They could see through the blinds, but they couldn't hear. They didn't know the story had just flipped on its head. Lena sank into one of the cheap vinyl chairs against the wall, her knees giving out. Her hands were still shaking so hard, she had to tuck them between her thighs to keep them still. I moved over and stood right next to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Her shirt felt damp with sweat. She smelled like copper, grease, and the cheap spearmint gum she chewed when she was stressed out of her mind. Superintendent Roth didn't sit down. He walked over to his desk, picked up a pen, and just stared at it, tapping it against his palm. The anger had drained from his face, replaced by a hollow gray look. He was a guy who worried about school rankings, district funding, and parental complaints. He wasn't built for the reality of what Lena had just dropped on his desk. If this is a lie, Lena, Roth said, his voice dropping to a low, rough register, if you're using some technical jargon to cover up a tantrum, the consequences will be double what we discussed. Do you understand me? Call Dr. Vance, Lena said, her voice dead and flat. He's the faculty advisor for the robotics lab. Ask him to look at line 408 of the firmware script on that drive. Felix labeled it as an enhanced grounding loop. It's not. It's a dead-end bridge directly to the chest harness. Roth looked at her for 3 long seconds, then reached for his desk phone. He dialed 3 digits for the internal extension. Vance, get up to my office. Right now. Drop whatever you're doing. He hung up without waiting for a reply. The wait was 10 minutes, but it felt like 4 hours. Nobody spoke. I watched the second hand on the school's circular wall clock tick-tick-tick its way around. At 8:14 a.m., the detective came out of the inner office. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked pale. He looked at Lena with a strange, heavy expression that made my stomach drop. Where is his mother? The detective asked Roth. Elena Kern works the morning shift at the medical billing center over on 5th, I offered, speaking up before Roth could answer. She doesn't have her phone on during calls. You have to call the main desk. The detective nodded to his partner, who immediately pulled out a cell phone and walked toward the hallway, dispersing the lingering students with a sharp wave of his hand. Did he admit it? Lena whispered, looking up. The detective didn't answer her directly. He just sat on the edge of the desk, looking down at his notepad. He isn't saying anything, kid, but he's shaking. He won't look at the photos of the arm. When I told him it was completely ruined beyond repair, he didn't get mad. He just closed his eyes and said, thank God. A sharp knock broke the tension, and Dr. Vance burst in, breathing heavily, holding a half-empty mug of lukewarm coffee. He was a guy in his late 40s, with a stained tie and grease permanently embedded under his fingernails. He looked at the police officers, then at Lena, then at the shattered charred remnants of the prosthetic lying in a plastic bin near the door. What is going on here? Vance asked, his voice nervous. Felix's presentation is tomorrow. The MIT scout is landing at noon. Why is his rig in a bin? Detective pointed at the flash drive on the desk. Dr. Vance, we need you to look at some code. This girl claims the device was modified to harm the student. Vance scoffed, setting his coffee down so hard it splashed over the rim. That's absurd. Felix is a genius. I reviewed his telemetry data on Tuesday morning. The power output was well within safe parameters for the neural interface. Look at the script uploaded at 11:42 p.m. on Tuesday, Lena said, her voice rising slightly, steadying under the weight of her technical certainty. He didn't use the school network. He used his home IP and bypassed the repository sync. It's in the local cache on that drive. Vance pulled his laptop from his leather bag, his expression shifting from annoyance to mild concern. He plugged the flash drive in, sphincters flying across the trackpad. The room went quiet again, save for the clicking of his keys. I watched his eyes move behind his thick glasses, scanning lines of text that looked like an alien language to me. Then he stopped clicking. His mouth opened slightly. He went back up, scrolled down again, then leaned back in his chair as if he'd been punched in the chest. Oh, Jesus, Vance muttered, his face turning the color of skim milk. What is it? Ruth demanded, leaning over the desk. She's right, Vance whispered, his voice trembling. He completely rerouted the emergency discharge. The bionic arm uses a high-capacity lithium polymer cell to handle the high-torque servos. It's a lot of juice. Usually, if there's a surge, it dumps into the outer carbon frame. He changed the logic gate. If the sensors detect a heart rate over 110 beats per minute, which anyone would have during a major live presentation, the system interprets it as a system failure and dumps the entire reserve directly through the subcutaneous electrodes in the chest plate. Vance looked up at Lena, his eyes wide with horror. It's a kill switch. He built a kill switch into his own chest. The reality of it hit the room like a physical weight. The $22,000 piece of machinery wasn't a triumph of engineering. It was an execution chair with a shoulder strap, and my sister had saved his life by taking a 20-ounce steel wrench and beating it into junk metal, but the relief didn't last. The door to the inner office opened again, and Felix stepped out, escorted by a second officer. He looked different than he had 2 years ago. The accident hadn't just taken his arm, it had hollowed him out. His left shoulder was hunched, his skin was sallow, and his shirt hung loosely over his collarbones. His right sleeve was pinned back with a safety pin, flapping slightly as he walked. He didn't look like an MIT prodigy. He looked like a ghost that hadn't found its way out of the building yet. He didn't look at the police. He didn't look at Roth. He looked directly at Lena. Why couldn't you just leave it alone, he asked, his voice low, dry, and completely empty of emotion. Why did you have to meddle? Lena stood up, her small frame rigid. Because you're an idiot, Felix. You thought you could just disappear and leave everyone else to clean up the mess. It was my arm, Felix said, his jaw tightening. My life. I didn't ask you to watch me. You didn't have to ask, Lena snapped back, a single tear cutting through the dust on her cheek. We lived next door to each other for 16 years. You think 2 years of being a jerk changes that? You think I was just going to let you turn yourself into a headline? The door to the main office flew open, and Elena Kern rushed in. Her hair was messy from the wind outside, and she was still wearing her blue hospital-style scrubs from the billing office. Her eyes were red, her chest heaving. She looked at her son, then at the police officers, and finally at the plastic bin containing the smashed prosthesis. Felix, she gasped, reaching for him with both hands. Felix, what did you do? Felix didn't hug her back with his remaining arm. He just stood there, stiff as a post, staring at the floor. Nothing, Mom. Lena ruined it. It's over. Elena turned to Lena, her face a mix of confusion and agony. Lena, why? We trusted you. Even when you two stopped talking, I thought, why would you break his arm? Kern, the lead detective, stepped in, placing a hand on the mother's shoulder. We need to go down to the station. There are some things we need to discuss regarding Felix's safety. Your daughter didn't do this out of malice. She just saved your son's life. The ride to the precinct was quiet. Since Lena was 17 and I was 19, I drove her in our beat-up Civic while our parents, who had been called from their jobs, agreed to meet us there. Lena sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the strip malls and fast food joints passing by on the highway. She was tearing the paper wrapper off a straw into tiny microscopic pieces. Are you going to be okay? I asked, turning down the radio. I don't know, she said, not looking at me. My hands feel like they're full of needles. You did the right thing. Then why do I feel like I just killed him anyway? She asked, her voice cracking. He looked at me like he hated me more than anything in the world. He wanted it to happen, Liam. He wanted to be gone, and I took that away from him. Good, I said firmly. Let him be mad. He's alive to be mad. At the station, we were led into a small conference room with a scratchy laminate table and 4 mismatched chairs. It smelled like old caulk floor wax. Our mom and dad arrived 20 minutes later, looking terrified. Mom immediately wrapped Lena in a hug that looked like it hurt, while Dad stood by the door, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, looking at me for an explanation. I told them everything. I told them about the late nights, the forum posts Lena had tracked, the code, the lithium bypass. As the details spilled out, my mother's grip on Lena tightened until her knuckles turned white. Dad just sank into a chair, his face lining with a deep, exhausted sorrow. They knew Felix. They remembered him bouncing on our trampoline, scraping his knees, eating popsicles on our porch. An hour later, the detective came in with a stack of manila folders. He sat down opposite us and sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose where his glasses had left deep red indents. Here's where we stand, the detective said, looking at Lena. The school isn't pressing charges. Superintendent Roth knows that if this gets out, the press will destroy the district for missing the warning signs. Doctor, Vance is already under investigation for failing to supervise the laboratory modifications properly. So, the criminal mischief charge is dropped. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But, the detective continued, raising a finger. Felix is currently under an involuntary 72-hour psychiatric hold at County General. His mother is with him. Because of the nature of the device, the fact that it was technically an improvised explosive hazard, the state fire marshal and the ATF had to be notified. They aren't going to pursue anything because it was a self-harm attempt. But Felix's scholarship is gone. The MIT presentation is canceled, and the story is starting to leak among the tech students. Is he going to jail? Lena asked. No, the detective said. But he's not going to school either. His mother is already talking about pulling him out of the district entirely once the hold is lifted. She's looking at facilities out in West Texas. When we got home that afternoon, the neighborhood felt different. The sun was hot, baking the asphalt of our cul-de-sac. Felix's house was directly across from ours. His mother's silver sedan wasn't in the driveway. The porch light was still on from the night before, casting a weak yellow glow in the bright Texas daylight. Lena went straight to her room and locked the door. I stayed downstairs with my parents. We sat in the kitchen, the room dark because Mom hadn't opened the blinds. How did we miss it? Mom asked, staring at a mug of tea she hadn't touched. We see Elena every week. We saw Felix walking to the mailbox. He always looked so quiet, but I thought he was just adjusting to the prosthetic. He was hiding, Dad said, his voice heavy. People who want to disappear don't make noise, Sarah. Around 6 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Nina, one of Lena's classmates, who had been outside the office that morning. Is it true? The text read. People are saying Felix tried to blow up the lab and Lena stopped him. There's a rumor he's in the psych ward. I didn't reply. I threw the phone onto the couch. The rumor mill was already turning, twisting the truth into something sensational, something dangerous. They were going to make Felix out to be a monster or a mad scientist, when the reality was just a broken 17-year-old kid who couldn't carry the weight of everyone's expectations anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the sound of Lena's wrench hitting that carbon fiber casing in my head, a sharp metallic crunch that had changed everything. Around 2 a.m., I got up to get a glass of water. As I passed Lena's room, I noticed a sliver of light under her door. I knocked softly. Lena? Go away, Liam. I have some of that leftover cobbler Mom made. You haven't eaten since breakfast. The lock clicked, and the door swung open an inch. Lena stood there in her oversized gray sweatshirt, her hair pulled back into a messy bun. Her eyes were bloodshot. Behind her desk lamp was the only light source, casting long, sharp shadows across her bedroom walls. I'm not hungry, she said. Can I come in? She hesitated, then stepped back, leaving the door open. I went inside and sat on the edge of her unmade bed. Her room smelled like old clothes and the lavender oil she used to put in her humidifier before everything went sideways. Her desk was cluttered with 3 different monitors, all of them displaying rows of green and white text. I couldn't read the code, but I recognized the structure. It was the same archive from Felix's cloud account. Why are you still looking at this? I asked gently. It's over, Lena. The arm is gone. He's safe. He's not safe, she said, sitting down in her rolling chair and pulling her knees up to her chest. He's just in a hospital room with a guard. The code isn't the problem, Liam. It was just the message. She reached out and tapped a key. A new window popped up. It wasn't code this time. It was a local forum thread from an old gaming site they used to play on when they were 12. The thread was private, buried under 5 layers of old directories, but Lena had found it. The last post was from Felix, timestamped at 3:14 a.m. on the morning of the incident. They want me to be the guy who came back, the post read. They want me to stand on that stage in Boston and smile and talk about overcoming adversity so they can put my face on the brochure. Every time I look at this plastic hand, I don't feel like a miracle. I feel like a puppet. If I fail tomorrow, I'm just the broken kid who couldn't make it. If I win, I have to spend the rest of my life being the inspirational story. I can't do 40 more years of this. I'm going to end the circuit. I read it twice, the cold knot in my stomach tightening. Did you show this to the police? No, Lena whispered. If I show them this, they'll keep him locked up longer. They'll put him in a state hospital. He hates being watched, Liam. If they put him in a place with cameras and mirrors, it'll finish him. You can't keep this to yourself, Lena. This is too big for a high school junior to manage. I'm the only one who looks at him without seeing the arm, she said fiercely, turning to me, her eyes flashing with a sudden, desperate anger. Everyone else looks at him and sees a tragedy or a triumph. I just see Felix. I see the kid who dropped his bike in our bushes and cried because he hit a toad. I have to fix this. How? I asked. You smashed his project. He hates you. He doesn't hate me, she said, her voice dropping back down to a whisper. He's just terrified because someone finally saw through him. The next morning, Friday, was the day of the scheduled MIT showcase. The school felt eerie. The robotics lab was locked. A yellow piece of police tape stretched across the door handle, flapping slightly every time the air conditioning kicked on. The students walked past it in silence, some whispering, some staring. Lena didn't go to her morning classes. She sat in the guidance counselor's office, waiting for her official disciplinary hearing with the school board. Our parents were there too, sitting on either side of her like shields. I stood in the hallway outside, leaning against the lockers. A few guys from the varsity soccer team, friends of Felix's from before the accident, came up to me. Hey Liam, one of them, a junior named Griffin, said. Is it true? Was Lena trying to steal his tech or something? That's what people are saying on Discord. Shut up, Griffin, I said, not looking at him. We're just asking, man. Felix was going to put our school on the map. Now the whole thing is canceled. The scouts didn't even land. It's messed up. You don't know anything about it, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Walk away. Griffin looked like he wanted to say something else, but the bell rang, and the hallway cleared out, leaving me alone with the hum of the fluorescent lights. At 11:30 a.m., the door to the counselor's office opened. Our dad came out first, his face set in a hard line. Mom followed, her hand on Lena's shoulder. What happened? I asked, standing up. Suspended for the rest of the semester, Dad said shortly. They're letting her take her finals online from home, but she's barred from campus property until August. It's a compromise. If they expelled her, they'd have to file an official report detailing the hardware. Then the school board wants this buried deep. Are you okay with that? I asked Lena. She nodded slowly. It doesn't matter. I don't want to be here anyway. As we walked out to the parking lot, a black SUV pulled up to the curb near the administration building. A woman in a sharp gray pantsuit got out, carrying a leather briefcase. She looked around the campus with an efficient, cold appraisal. That's the MIT regional rep, Lena said, stopping on the sidewalk. She was supposed to meet Felix at noon. We watched as the woman walked up the steps and into the main office. She didn't know yet that the prodigy she had flown in to see was currently sitting in a psychiatric ward 20 miles away, and that his masterpiece was currently sitting in pieces in a trash bin. When we got back to our house, there was a silver Hyundai parked in Felix's driveway. It wasn't his mom's car. It belonged to his aunt, Rosalind, who lived down in San Antonio. She was a stern, practical woman who didn't come around often, usually only for major holidays. Seeing her car there meant the family was already circling the wagons, preparing for whatever came next. Lena didn't go inside our house. She walked straight across the asphalt towards Felix's driveway. Lena, wait, Mom called out from the porch. Leave them be for today. Let the family breathe. I need to talk to Rosalind, Lena said, not stopping. I followed her. If things went bad, I wanted to be there to pull her back. We reached the edge of the Kearns' lawn just as the front door opened. Aunt Rosalind came out carrying a cardboard box filled with old textbooks and tangled cables. She looked exhausted, her graying hair pinned back loosely, her face lined with stress. When she saw Lena, she stopped on the porch step, her grip on the box tightening. Lena, Rosalind said, her tone cautious, not entirely angry but far from warm. This isn't a good time. Is he coming home tomorrow? Lena asked, standing at the bottom of the steps. Rosalind sighed, setting the box down on a wicker porch chair. They're accepting the hold for another 48 hours. The doctors want to adjust his medication. And Elena is a wreck. She can't be alone in the house right now. I have his files, Lena said, taking a step closer. The real ones. The ones before he changed the circuit logic. He didn't destroy his old notes. He just hid them in a separate partition because he didn't want Dr. Vance to see how much he was struggling with the sensor lag. Rosalind looked at her, a flicker of something heavy and sad passing through her eyes. Lena, the arm doesn't matter anymore. The project is dead. The scholarship is gone. We're looking at selling the house to cover the medical bills from the first surgery and whatever this is going to cost. It does matter, Lena insists, her voice small but sharp. If he thinks everything he built is gone, he has nothing left to look at except the accident. He needs to see that the work was real. The safety bypass was a separate file. The actual engineering, it was beautiful, Rosalind. It worked. Rosalind leaned against the porch railing, looking out over the quiet suburban street. He doesn't want to see it, kiddo. He told his mom he wants her to throw away everything in the garage. Every circuit board, every soldering iron, every piece of scrap metal. He wants it all in the dumpster by Monday. Lena went white. You can't do that. It's what he asked for, Rosalind said quietly. Sometimes people just want to clear the slate. He's not clearing the slate, Lena said, her teeth clicking together. He's erasing himself. She turned around and walked back across the street before Rosalind could reply. I stayed behind for a second, looking at the older woman. She's right, you know, I told Rosalind. She stayed up for 3 weeks straight trying to find a way to fix this without hurting him. Don't throw his stuff away. Rosalind didn't answer. She just picked up the box of cables and went back inside, the heavy front door clicking shut behind her. By Sunday evening, the neighborhood was completely dark. The Kearns' house remained silent. The silver Hyundai still parked in the drive, but no lights showing through the windows. It felt like living next to a tomb. Lena spent the entire weekend in the garage. Our dad had given her a small workbench in the corner, next to his old radial arm saw. She had dragged 3 storage tubs of old electronics down from the attic, things she and Felix had collected over the years from old TVs, broken computers, and discarded stereos they found on curbs during bulk trash weeks. I went out there around 9 p.m. with 2 bottles of soda. The garage was hot, smelling of gasoline, old lawnmower oil, and the sharp hot scent of rosin core solder. Lena was leaning over a small green circuit board, a magnifying visor strapped to her forehead, her soldering iron emitting a tiny wisp of gray smoke as she tapped a connection. What are you building? I asked, setting a soda down near her elbow. A diagnostic bridge, she said, not looking up. Felix's neural interface used an old Bluetooth low-energy protocol because he couldn't afford the medical-grade transmitters. The receiver chip from his smashed arm, I didn't break that part. I targeted the main capacitor and the actuator housing. The logic board is still intact in the school's evidence bin. Lena, I said, sitting on an overturned 5-gallon bucket. The police have that bin. You can't just go get it. Dr. Vance has it, she corrected me, lifting the visor. Her face was smudged with gray carbon dust. The police cleared the scene on Friday because there was no third-party criminal intent. The school has the physical remnants in the lab locker. Vance is coming in tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. to pack up his office before his administrative leave starts. I stared at her. How do you know that? I still have access to the department schedule, she said, her voice dropping to that cold functional register she used when she was entirely focused on a problem. He emailed the superintendent yesterday, asking for a 2-hour window to clear his personal effects before the board meeting on Monday afternoon. I'm going to meet him there. You're suspended, Lena. If you set foot on campus, they'll call the cops for real this time. You'll get a criminal trespass charge. I don't care about the charge, Liam, she said, looking me dead in the eye. If Vance throws that board into a compactor, Felix's work is gone forever. The code on my drive is just numbers. The board has his physical tuning calibrations on the flash memory. It took him 8 months to map those sensors to his nerve endings. If he has to start over from scratch 3 years from now, he'll never do it. She looked so small under the harsh fluorescent tube of the garage light, but her jaw was set in that same stubborn line she'd had since she was 6 years old. She wasn't doing this for a reward. She wasn't doing it so Felix would like her again. She was doing it because she couldn't live in a world where she let a piece of her friend die. Fine, I said, taking a swig of my soda. 6 a.m. is early. I'm driving. The sky was a dull bruised purple when my alarm went off at 5:15 a.m. on Monday. The air was cool, the Texas humidity hanging low over the grass like a wet blanket. We didn't tell Mom and Dad. We just slipped out the back door, the old Civic, starting with a loud, throaty rattle that made me nervous we'd wake the whole block. The Horizon Tech parking lot was completely empty except for one single vehicle. Dr. Van Vance's old blue Volvo station wagon, parked right next to the loading dock behind the engineering building. Lena was carrying a black canvas backpack. Her fingers were twitching against the straps. Stay in the car with the engine running, she said as we pulled up behind the dumpsters. No way, I said, turning the key off. If Vance calls the office, I'm the one who handles him. You just get the board. We walked quickly across the dew-slicked asphalt toward the side entrance. The school felt strange at dawn. No bell ringing, no shouting kids, no smell of cafeteria food. Just the quiet hum of the industrial ventilation system. The door was propped open with a wooden wedge, a clear sign that Vance was inside making trips back and forth in his car. We slipped into the hallway, our sneakers squeaking softly on the polished terrazzo floors. The light was dim. Only every third emergency light turned on. We reached the robotics lab in less than a minute. The yellow police cape was torn, hanging limply from the frame. Inside, the room looked like a crime scene that had been abandoned halfway through. 2 stools were overturned, a box of zip ties had spilled across the floor, and the whiteboards were still covered in Felix's neat microscopic handwriting. Equations for torque calculations and battery life estimates. Dr. Vance was standing by his desk, packing old textbooks into a liquor store box. He looked older than he had on Thursday. His shoulders slumped, his eyes hollowed out by 3 days of sleeplessness and the sudden end of his academic career. When he heard our footsteps, he jumped, dropping a heavy textbook onto the desk with a dull thud. Lena, he gasped, his hand going to his chest. What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be within 500 feet of this building. I need the logic board from the bin, Dr. Vance, Lena said, her voice steady as she walked into the center of the lab. Are you insane? Vance whispered, looking around as if the superintendent was hiding in the cabinet. The board is school property now. It's evidence for the insurance adjustment. I'm sealing the locker this morning. The insurance isn't going to pay for a device that was modified for suicide, and you know it, Lena said, taking another step. They're going to look at the telemetry data you approved, and they're going to sue the district for negligence. The only thing that board is going to do is sit in a legal storage locker until it rots. Vance sank into his chair, his hands flat on the desk. I can't give it to you, Lena. If it goes missing, I'm the one responsible. My career is already over. I'm looking at a license suspension. You missed the code because you wanted the MIT credit as much as he did, Lena said. It wasn't an insult. It was just a statement of fact, delivered with a cold, clear precision that made Vance flinch. You wanted the name Horizon Tech on that banner. You didn't look at line 408 because you were too busy scheduling the local news crew. Vance closed his eyes. For 5 seconds, the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. It's in the gray cabinet by the CNC, he said softly, not opening his eyes. The keys are in the top drawer of my desk. Take it and get out before the janitorial staff starts their rounds at 6:30. Lena didn't waste time saying thank you. She grabbed the keys from the drawer, walked over to the tall steel cabinet, and unlocked it with a sharp metallic click. Inside, sitting on top of a stack of plastic organizers, was the gray plastic bin. The bionic arm was a mess. The carbon fiber shell was cracked open like an eggshell. The tiny silver gears and hydraulic lines twisted and severed. But right in the center of the forearm housing, protected by a secondary rubber dampener, was a square green circuit board about the size of a postcard. It was immaculate, untouched by the reprint. Lena pulled a small multi-tool from her pocket and went to work, her movements fast and practiced. She unscrewed the 4 brass standoffs, securing the board to the frame, disconnected the 3 delicate ribbon cables leading to the finger servos, and lifted the board out like she was handling a piece of ancient porcelain. She slid it into an anti-static bag, dropped it into her backpack, and locked the cabinet back up. She tossed the keys onto Vance's desk. Thank you, I told him as we turned to leave. Vance didn't look up from his box of books. Just don't let him build another one, Liam. I don't think his heart can take it. We were back in the Civic and moving before the dashboard clock hit 6:15 a.m. The sun was just starting to crest the tree line, casting long orange shadows across the highway as we drove back toward our side of town. Now what? I asked, looking over at Lena. She was holding the backpack tightly against her stomach. Now we wait for him to get out, she said. His 72 hours are up today at noon. If his mom doesn't sign the extension papers, he'll be home by 3. We spent the rest of the morning in the kitchen, pretending to do normal things. I cleaned the coffee maker. Mom folded laundry. Dad sat on the back porch, watching the crows circle the old oak tree in the yard. Nobody talked about Felix, but every time a car drove down the street, everyone's head turned toward the front window. At 2:45 p.m., a car turned into the cul-de-sac. It wasn't the silver Hyundai. It was a yellow cab, its engine idling loudly as it pulled up to the curb in front of the Kearns' house. The rear door opened, and Felix got out. He was alone. His mother wasn't with him. He was wearing the same gray sweatpants and dark blue hoodie he'd been wearing on Thursday. His right sleeve still pinned back. He looked small, his shoulders hunched against the bright afternoon sun. He didn't have any luggage, just a small brown paper bag from the hospital containing his personal items. He walked up his driveway slowly, his feet dragging slightly on the concrete. He didn't look across the street at our house. He just reached the front door, unlocked it with his left hand, and disappeared inside. Lena stood by our living room window, her hand resting on the glass, leaving a small circle of fog. He's home, she whispered. Where's his mom? I asked, standing behind her. Probably still at the clinic signing the discharge paperwork, she said. He must have insisted on taking a cab. He didn't want her watching him drive home. She picked up her backpack from the coffee table, her knuckles white. Don't go over there yet, I cautioned, reaching for her arm. Give him 20 minutes to breathe, Lena. He just got out of a ward. If I wait 20 minutes, he's going to go into that garage and start throwing things away, she said, pulling out of my grip. I'm going now. She didn't run, but she walked with a purposeful, heavy stride across the asphalt. I didn't try to stop her this time. I just followed 10 paces behind, watching the back of her head. The Kearns' front door wasn't locked. Lena didn't knock. She just turned the knob knob and walked right in, a boundary she hadn't crossed in 2 years, but one that felt entirely natural given the stakes. The house smelled like stale air and old upholstery, the smell of a home that had been shut up tight for 4 days during a Texas summer. The living room was dark, the curtains drawn shut. "Felix?" Lena called out, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet hallway. No answer. We walked down the hall past the kitchen. On the counter, an empty cereal bowl from Thursday morning was still sitting in the sink, the milk dried into a crusty white film. We reached the back of the house, where the door to the attached garage was slightly ajar. A faint light was coming through the crack, along with the sound of metal scraping against plastic. Lena pushed the door open. The garage was messy. A giant green plastic dumpster sat in the center of the floor, delivered by the city for the bulk pickup scheduled for the next morning. Felix was standing next to it, his left hand gripping the handle of a heavy plastic storage bin filled with circuit components, breadboards, and old copper wire coils. He was trying to lift it with one arm to dump it over the high rim of the dumpster, his face red with exertion, his teeth bared. The weight was too much for one arm. The bin slipped from his fingers, crashing down onto the concrete floor, spilling hundreds of tiny resistors, capacitors, and silver screws across the floor like metal rain. Felix stood there, staring down at the mess. His chest was heaving. He didn't move to pick them up. He just let his left arm drop to his side, his head falling forward until his chin touched his chest.
"Need some help?"
Lena asked softly from the doorway. Felix didn't jump. He didn't look surprised. He just slowly turned his head, his eyes dead and flat under his dark fringe of hair. "Get out of my house, Lena," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "No," she said, walking into the garage, her sneakers crunching over the scattered screws. "You made a mess. I'm helping you clean it." "I don't want it clean," he shouted, his voice suddenly cracking, the anger breaking through the frost for the first time. "I want it gone. Can't you understand that? I want every single piece of this garbage out of my sight." He kicked a plastic container across the floor, sending it crashing into the side of the lawnmower. "You think you're a hero?" he sneered, taking a step toward her, his face twisting into something ugly and painful. "You think you saved me? You didn't save anything. You just made sure everybody knows. You made me a freak twice. First the arm, now the crazy kid who tried to fry himself. Thanks, Lena. Great job." Lena didn't flinch. She stood right in front of him, less than 2 feet away, her black backpack hanging from her shoulder. "You were already a freak, Felix," she said, her voice dropping to a quiet, brutal honesty that made him freeze. "We both were. Remember middle school? Remember when you spent 3 weeks building that model rocket that exploded on the pad, and you sat in the dirt and cried until your nose bled? You've always been a drama queen when things don't work the first time. This isn't a model rocket," he whispered, his left hand curling into a fist. "I know," she said. She reached into her bag and pulled out the green logic board in its anti-static sleeve. She held it out between them. "This is the calibration profile for your right index finger. It's the one you spent 3 weeks trying to get to register a microvoltage change from your shoulder muscle." Felix looked down at the board. His jaw worked, his eyes moving over the green lines and silver solder tools he knew by heart. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I stole it from Vance's office this morning," she said. "If you want to throw it in the dumpster, go ahead. It's your work, but you're going to look at it first." Felix didn't take the board. He just stared at it, his breathing slowing down, his shoulders dropping an inch. "I can't do it anymore, Lena," he whispered, the anger completely draining out of him, leaving him looking like the 12-year-old kid who used to hide in our treehouse when his parents argued. "The pressure? Everyone keeps looking at me like I'm supposed to be some kind of miracle. My mom works 12 hours a day to pay for the therapy, and every time she looks at my sleeve, she looks like she's about to cry. I thought if I went out at the expo, it would just look like an accident, a technical glitch. The school would have to pay her out the insurance policy, and she wouldn't have to worry about me anymore. She'd still be missing a son, you idiot," Lena said, her voice finally breaking, the tears spilling over her lower lids. "You think she wants 20 grand from a lawsuit more than she wants you eating cereal at the counter?" Felix didn't answer. He looked at the scattered components on the floor, then at the empty sleeve pinned to his shirt. "I don't have an arm, Lena," he said, his voice entirely hollow. "It's just gone. Every morning I wake up and I reach for my glasses with a hand that isn't there. It doesn't get better. Then we build a better hand," Lena said, taking his left fist and forcing the green circuit board into his palm. "Not for MIT, not for the school board, just for your glasses." Felix looked down at the board in his hand, his thumb tracing the smooth green edge. He didn't throw it in the dumpster. He just held it, his fingers tightening around it until the plastic wrapper crinkled. Outside, the sound of a car door closing signaled his mother's arrival. The garage door opened fully a moment later, and Elena Kern stood there, her eyes red, her keys clutching in her hand. She looked at Felix, then at Lena, then at the mess on the floor. She didn't say anything. She just walked over, wrapped her arms around her son's neck, and held on like she was trying to keep him from floating away. Felix stood stiffly for a moment, then his left arm came up, wrapping around his mother's back, his fingers still clutching the green board against her scrub top. Lena stepped back, her backpack light on her shoulder. She looked at me and nodded toward the door. We walked back across the street in the late afternoon heat, the asphalt hot through our shoes. The story wasn't over. The school board meeting was in 2 hours. The rumors were still spreading through the school group chat, and Felix still had a long gray road ahead of him in some clinic out west. But as we reached our porch, Lena stopped and looked back at the house across the street. The garage door was closing, shutting out the dumpster, leaving only the small yellow porch light burning in the shade. "He kept the board," I said, opening the front door. "Yeah," Lena said, wiping her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt, her jaw setting back into that familiar, stubborn line. "He kept it." We didn't have much time to let that sink in. The school board meeting was scheduled for 4:03 p.m., and the district administrative building was a 20-minute drive through heavy afternoon traffic. Mom and Dad were waiting for us in the kitchen, already dressed in the kind of clothes they usually saved for church or funerals. Dad had his keys in his hand. He looked at Lena's dusty sweatshirt and told her to go change into something with a collar. He didn't ask where we had been. He didn't want to know. The district office was a low, flat brick building behind the middle school. It smelled like industrial floor wax and old paper. We were shown into a conference room with a long mahogany table that looked entirely out of place under the buzzing, yellow-tinted fluorescent lights. Superintendent Roth was already there, sitting at the far end. He wasn't alone. Next to him was a woman with severe, wire-rimmed glasses named Adele, who I recognized as the school board president. And next to her was a man I had never seen before. He wore a sharp navy suit that probably cost more than my Civic. He had a thick file folder resting in front of him. "Have a seat," Roth said. His voice lacked the barking authority it had in his office last week. He just sounded tired. Dad pulled out a chair for Mom, then sat down next to Lena. I took the seat on the end, nearest the door. "I'll keep this brief," the man in the suit said. He didn't introduce himself, but the BRAP's nameplate sitting flat on his folder read, "Soren Drent, Legal Counsel. The district has reviewed the incident from Thursday morning. We are prepared to offer a permanent resolution that avoids involving the juvenile justice system any further." He slid a thick packet of stapled papers across the polished wood. It stopped in front of Dad. "This is a voluntary disciplinary agreement," Drent said, folding his hands. "If Lena signs, and you co-sign as her guardians, the district will formally drop the expulsion proceedings. She will finish her junior year online, as currently arranged, and she will be allowed to return to campus for her senior year." Mom let out a breath she'd been holding. Dad didn't look relieved. He pulled his reading glasses out of his shirt pocket, put them on, and started reading the first page. I watched his eyes track back and forth. After about 30 seconds, his jaw muscles started to jump. "What is this?" Dad asked, his voice low and tight. "It's a standard non-disclosure and behavioral admission contract," Drent replied smoothly. Dad flipped to the second page, his finger stabbing at a paragraph near the bottom. "This says my daughter admits to unprovoked, malicious destruction of property due to emotional distress. It says she takes full responsibility for the financial loss of the hardware. And it says we agree not to publicly discuss the technical specifications of the device." "That's correct," Drent said. "Where's the part about Felix's bypass?" Dad demanded, looking up at Roth. "Where's the part about the lithium cell and the chest sensors? The part where my daughter saved his life?" Roth looked down at his hands. Adele, the board president, adjusted her glasses. "Mr. and Mrs. Calloway," Drent said, using our last name with a practiced, heavy patience. "There is no bypass, Doctor. Vance conducted a thorough review of the server logs this weekend, before his administrative leave began. The code your daughter claimed to have seen on the school network does not exist." Lena's head snapped up. "That's a lie. He used a home IP, but it synced to the local cache on the lab computer. It's on my flash drive. Your flash drive contains a text file that was created on your personal laptop," Drent said, not missing a beat. "It is not official telemetry. Furthermore, Doctor, Vance has wiped the local cache on the lab computers to comply with the district's new data privacy protocols regarding student medical information." The room went dead quiet. I felt a cold spike of panic hit my stomach. Vance had wiped the server. He hadn't just packed up his books. He had covered his tracks. If he admitted he missed a lethal modification on a school-sponsored project, he wasn't just losing a job. He was facing criminal negligence, so he deleted it. "You're calling my daughter a liar," Dad said, his voice rising. "I am saying we have 4 camera angles of her taking a wrench to a $22,000 piece of machinery," Drent said, his tone entirely devoid of emotion. "We have a dozen witnesses who can testify to her public animosity toward Felix Kern. We have a destroyed prosthetic, and we have an insurance company that is demanding to know why their policy on the robotics lab shouldn't be voided due to lack of supervision." Drent leaned forward, tapping a pen against the table. "If the district has to admit that a student built a lethal device under our roof, our funding gets slashed. The insurance drops us. Dr. Vance gets sued. The school board gets recalled. But if this was simply an act of vandalism by a jealous former friend having a mental health crisis, the insurance pays out. Felix's mother doesn't get bankrupted by the loss, and your daughter doesn't go to jail. You want her to take the fall," Mom whispered, horrified. "You want her to put on her permanent academic record that she's violent and unstable, just to save your budget. I want to offer you a way out," Drent countered. "If you refuse to sign, the district will immediately reinstate the expulsion. We will hand the destroyed hardware back to the local police and recommend they pursue the felony sabotage charge. Lena will be 18 in 6 months. They might just try her as an adult." Dad stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "We're leaving," he said. "You have 48 hours to return the signed document," Drent said, not standing up, not even raising his voice. "After that, the offer expires." We walked out to the parking lot in silence. The afternoon heat was brutal, radiating up from the blacktop. Dad unlocked the doors to his truck, but he didn't get in immediately. He leaned against the side of the bed, took off his glasses, and rubbed his eyes until they were red. "Dad," Lena said softly, standing by the passenger door. "If I sign it, it's over. We don't have to fight them." "No," Dad said, his voice cracking. He looked at her, his expression a mix of fierce pride and total exhaustion. "You did the hardest, bravest thing a person could do. I am not letting you put your name on a piece of paper that says you're a criminal." "But what if they press charges?" Mom asked, her arms wrapped around herself. "We can't afford a lawyer like that guy in there. We can't afford a trial." "We'll figure it out," Dad said, though he didn't sound like he believed it. When we got back to the house, the neighborhood felt different. The tension wasn't just in our living room anymore. It was leaking out into the street. As I pulled my Civic into our driveway, I noticed something shoved into our mailbox. I walked over and pulled it out. It was a piece of notebook paper, folded twice. Someone had written on the outside in thick black Sharpie, "Keep your psycho daughter away from us." I crumpled it up and shoved it into my jeans pocket before Lena or Mom could see it. The rumor mill had done its work over the weekend. The school was pushing the narrative of the jealous stalker, and the other kids, and their parents, were eating it up. It was easier to believe that Lena was crazy than to believe the golden boy had tried to end it all on a live feed. That evening, the situation got worse. Around 8 p.m., I was sitting on on the couch in the dark, scrolling through my phone. Lena was upstairs in her room. I opened the local community Facebook group just to see how bad the gossip had gotten. The top post pinned to the page made my blood run completely cold. It was a GoFundMe campaign. The title reads, "Help Felix Rebuild. Victim of senseless vandalism." There was a picture of Felix from before the accident, smiling, holding a soccer ball. Below it was a long, heart-wrenching paragraph about how a troubled classmate had maliciously destroyed his life's work out of spite, costing the family thousands in uninsured losses and ruining his shot at MIT. It asked the community to rally together to raise $25,000 to cover the cost of a new prosthetic and legal fees. The campaign had been live for 4 hours. It had already raised $6,000. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the person who had shared it to the community page, adding a string of broken heart emojis and a plea for justice. It was Elena Kern. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over her name. Felix's mother had posted it. She had to know it was a lie. She had been in our garage. She knew Felix kept the logic board. She knew Lena had saved him. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Lena came down into the living room wearing her pajamas, holding an empty water glass. She saw my face lit by the glow of the screen. "What is it?" she asked, stopping at the bottom of the steps. "Nothing," I said, quickly locking the phone and tossing it onto the cushion next to me. "You're a terrible liar, Liam," she said, walking over. She picked up my phone, pressed the side button, and held it out to me to unlock it with my thumbprint. When I hesitated, she just looked at me. "Unlock it. I'm not a child. I know they're talking about me." I unlocked it. I let her read the screen. She stood there in the dark living room, the pale blue light reflecting in her eyes. I watched her read the description, the donation amount, and the name of the person who shared it. She didn't throw the phone. She didn't scream. She just handed it back to me. Her hands were perfectly steady. "She needs the money," Lena said quietly. "Lena, she's calling you a vandal to the entire town. She's letting people think you ruined his life so she can collect donations. She has medical debt from his first surgery," Lena said, her voice flat, devoid of the emotional defense I expected. "Aunt Rosalind told me. They were looking at selling the house. The school's insurance isn't going to pay out if the board buries the real story. This is the only way she can keep her home." "It's wrong," I said, angry now. "You saved her son, and she's serving you up to a mob to pay her mortgage." "It's just the internet, Liam," she said, turning toward the kitchen. But it wasn't just the internet. The next morning, Tuesday, I walked out to my car to head to my shift at the hardware store. The morning air was already thick and humid. As I rounded the back of my Civic, I stopped dead in my tracks. Someone had taken a key and dragged it the entire length of the driver's side door, carving a deep, jagged silver line through the faded blue paint. Written in the dust on the rear window, in large, crude letters, was the word "freak." I stood there staring at it, my hands balling into fists. I looked across the street. The Kearns' house was quiet. The silver Hyundai was gone, meaning Aunt Rosalind had gone back to San Antonio. Elena's sedan was parked in the driveway. I didn't think about it. I just walked across the asphalt. My boots hit their driveway with heavy, deliberate thuds. I walked up onto their porch and hammered my fist against the front door. 3 loud, solid knocks. A minute passed. I knocked again, harder this time. The deadbolt clicked. The door opened a few inches, held by a brass chain lock. Elena Kern looked out through the gap. She was wearing her blue scrubs, a cup of coffee in her hand. She looked exhausted, the bags under her eyes dark and heavy. "Liam," she said, her voice dropping, "you shouldn't be over here." "Take the GoFundMe down, Mrs. Kern," I said. I didn't yell, but I didn't keep the edge out of my voice. "Take it down right now." She flinched, looking past me toward our house, making sure Mom or Dad wasn't out on the lawn. "I didn't start it. One of the other parents from the PTA set it up. I just shared it. You endorsed it. You're letting them drag Lena through the mud. Somebody keyed my car last night, Elena. They left a note in our mailbox. Because you're letting them think my sister is a monster." "She broke his arm, Liam," Elena whispered, her grip on the door edge tightening. "She stopped him from stopping his own heart." I snapped back. "You know that. You were there in the garage." "I don't know anything," Elena suddenly hissed, her eyes filling with sudden desperate tears. "I know my son came home from a psychiatric ward empty-handed. I know he hasn't spoken a word to me in 2 days. He sits in his room with the door locked, holding that green piece of plastic she gave him, and he just stares at the wall. I don't know what code she thinks she saw. I only know that my son was about to go to MIT, and now he's barely eating." She pressed her face closer to the gap in the door. "Do you know what the hospital bill for a 3-day involuntary hold costs? Do you know what outpatient therapy costs? We have nothing left. If I tell the truth, the school washes their hands of us. If I let the PTA think Lena had a jealous fit, we get $25,000. We survive. So you're selling my sister out." "I am keeping a roof over my son's head," she said, her voice shaking with a terrible, ugly honesty. "I am sorry, Liam. I really am. But if it comes down to my boy or your sister, I'm choosing my boy. Do not come back over here." She shut the door. The deadbolt slid into place with a heavy final click. I stood on the porch for a long time, listening to the hum of the air conditioning unit on the side of their house. She wasn't an evil person. She was a terrified, drowning mother grasping at a piece of driftwood. But she was using my sister to stay afloat, and the school district was the current pulling us all under. I walked back across the street, my mind racing. Dad was right. We couldn't afford a lawyer to fight Soren Drent. If we didn't sign that paper by tomorrow afternoon, Lena was going to be indicted. And if the whole town believed Elena's version of the story, no jury was going to look twice at a teenage girl with a history of saying spiteful things in the hallway. When I walked into our kitchen, Lena was sitting at the island, eating a piece of dry toast. She had her laptop open. The screen was filled with the green text of Felix's archive. "Did you talk to her?" Lena asked, not looking up from the screen. "Yeah," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee I didn't really want. "She's not taking it down. She needs is the money." "I know," Lena said. She tapped a few keys, bringing up a new window. It wasn't the code archive this time. It was the Horizon Tech student portal. "What are you doing?" I asked, walking around the island to look over her shoulder. Trent, said Vance. Wipe the local cache, Lena said, her eyes tracking the screen. That means the physical proof of the bypass is gone from the school's servers. My flash drive is just a copy. It wouldn't hold up in court if they claim I forged it. Right, which is why Dad is terrified. But Vance is an idiot, Lena muttered, her fingers flying across the keyboard. He's a mechanical engineer, not a network architect. When you wipe a local cache on a district machine, it sends an automated ping to the primary backup server at the county data center to log the deletion event. It's an anti-ransomware protocol they installed last year. She hit enter. A wall of text scrolled down the screen, pausing on a highlighted line of red code. He didn't just delete the cache, Lena said, leaning closer to the monitor. He overwrote the directory with a junk file to corrupt the sector. But the ping logged the exact byte size of the file he deleted on Sunday night. 4.2 megabytes. The exact size of Felix's altered schematic. Does that prove what the file was? I asked. No, she admitted, leaning back. It just proves Vance destroyed evidence on a Sunday night, 12 hours before a disciplinary hearing. If we had a lawyer, they could subpoena the county data center and prove he was covering something. We don't have a lawyer, Lena. We don't have 25 grand. We have a keyed car and a deadline. Lena closed the laptop with a soft snap. She looked out the kitchen window toward the Kearns house. Then we don't use a lawyer, she said quietly. We use the one person the school board is terrified of right now. Who? The MIT regional scout, Lena said, her voice dropping into that cold, functional tone. She didn't fly back to Boston. She stayed to investigate the cancellation. Nina texted me. She's interviewing the robotics team today at noon. I'm not letting you go back to that campus, I said immediately. If Roth catches you within 100 yards of the building, he won't just suspend you. He'll have you arrested for trespassing. It'll give Drent all the leverage he needs to force Dad to sign that NDA. Lena frowned, staring at the student portal on her screen. Liam, the robotics team meets in the annex. I know exactly how to get in through the loading dock. I can talk to her before Roth even knows she's doing interviews. No, I said, putting my hand flat on her laptop keyboard so she couldn't type. You stay here. You print out that server log, and you write down a timeline of exactly what happened. Everything you saw, the exact times Felix uploaded the altered schematics, the exact time Vance wiped the cache. Give it to me. I'll go. You don't know what to say to her. You don't know the engineering terms. I don't need to explain the engineering, I told her. I just need to explain liability. She's a scout for a university that has a multi-billion-dollar endowment. If she finds out the school district almost let a suicidal kid wear a lethal, untested electrical hazard onto their campus with their logo on it, she's not going to care about the math. She's going to care about the lawsuit. Lena stared at my hand on her keyboard for a few seconds. Then she pulled her hands back into her lap and nodded. Fine, but you have to corner her alone. If Drent is there, he'll shut you down. He'll threaten you with harassment. 10 minutes later, I walked out the front door with 2 folded sheets of printer paper shoved into my back pocket. The drive to Horizon Tech was miserable. My AC was barely working, blowing lukewarm air into my face while the midday Texas sun baked the roof of the Civic. I pulled into the visitor lot across from the administration building at 11:45 a.m. I didn't get out. I just rolled the windows down, slouched in my seat, and watched the main doors. The heat was suffocating. The asphalt smelled like hot tar and exhaust. I watched a few teachers walk to their cars for their lunch break. I saw Griffin and a few other guys from the soccer team loitering by the cafeteria doors. At 12:20 p.m., the heavy glass doors of the admin building pushed open. Soren Drent walked out first, holding his briefcase, his suit jacket unbuttoned. Superintendent Roth was right behind him, talking quickly, gesturing with his hands. And walking beside them was the woman we had seen the day before, the MIT regional scout. She was wearing a sharp tailored navy dress and carrying a leather tote bag. She looked severely unamused. They stopped at the curb. Roth was smiling, a tight, nervous kind of smile. He offered his hand. The scout shook it briefly, then turned and walked toward a sleek black rental car parked in the reserved spots. Drent and Roth stood on the curb, watching her back out and drive away, before they turned and headed back inside. I started my engine and pulled out of the visitor lot, keeping 2 cars between my Civic and the black rental car. I didn't have to follow her far. She turned into the parking lot of a local bakery and cafe about 2 miles down the road. She parked, grabbed her tote bag, and went inside. I parked a few spaces away, took a deep breath, and pulled the folded papers from my pocket. I walked into the cafe. It was crowded with the lunch rush, smelling of roasted turkey, sourdough, and bitter espresso. The air conditioning hit me like a wall of ice. I spotted her immediately. She was sitting at a small 2-top table in the back corner, her laptop already open, a half-eaten sandwich pushed to the side. She was typing furiously, her reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. I walked over and stood by her table. Excuse me, I said. She held up one finger, her eyes not leaving her screen, and finished typing a sentence. Then she hit the enter key, lowered her hands, and looked up at me. If you're asking if this chair is taken, it is, she said. Her voice was brisk, marked by a sharp East Coast accent that cut right through the background noise of the cafe. I'm waiting for a colleague. I'm not looking for a seat, I said. My name is Liam Calloway. Lena Calloway is my sister. The scout's expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed slightly. She reached out and closed her laptop a fraction of an inch, just enough to obscure the screen. The vandal, she said flatly. She's not a vandal, I said, and she didn't destroy Felix Kearns' project out of jealousy. I know Superintendent Roth and their lawyer just spent the last hour telling you she's unstable. They're lying to you. The woman sighed, reached up, and took off her glasses. Mr. Calloway, I am flying back to Boston at 4 o'clock. I just spent 90 minutes listening to school administrators tap dance around the fact that they have zero institutional control over their own robotics lab. I really don't have the patience to listen to a teenager's brother try to do damage control for a criminal mischief charge. I don't care about damage control, I said, keeping my voice low. I care about the fact that Dr. Vance almost shipped a lethal device to your expo. That stopped her. Her hand, which had been reaching for her coffee cup, paused midair. What did you say? She asked, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. I pulled the papers from my pocket, unfolded them, and laid them flat over her sandwich plate. My sister had access to Felix's cloud drive, I said, pointing to the timeline Nina had written out. He couldn't handle the pressure of the presentation. At 11:42 p.m. on Tuesday, he bypassed the thermal regulators on the neural battery pack and created a closed circuit directly to his chest sensors. If his heart rate went over 1 or 10 at your showcase tomorrow, that arm was going to dump 400 volts into his chest. He built a suicide rig. The scout stared at the paper. She didn't touch it. That is a very serious, very specific allegation, she said slowly. If this were true, it would be in the school's server telemetry logs, Doctor. Vance would have flagged it. Vance didn't check the logs because he was too busy trying to get his name in the papers, I said. I pointed to the second sheet of paper, the printout of the server cache deletion ping. And when my sister smashed the hardware to stop Felix from using it, Vance realized he missed it. He realized he signed off on a lethal device, so he wiped the lab's local cache on Sunday night to cover his tracks. That's the automated server ping proving the deletion of a 4.2 megabyte file, the exact size of the altered schematics. She finally reached out and picked up the second piece of paper. Her eyes scanned the green and white text, resting on the highlighted timestamp. I watched her face carefully. I expected shock. I expected her to gasp, or to look horrified. Instead, her expression just turned entirely to stone. She didn't look like a woman who had just discovered a tragedy. She looked like a corporate auditor who had just found a massive liability in a ledger. What is your name again? She asked. Liam. Sit down, Liam, she commanded, gesturing to the empty chair. I sat. My name is Cicely Thorne, she said, folding the papers precisely in half. I have been evaluating STEM programs for 14 years. I have seen students cheat, I have seen faculty plagiarize, and I have seen booster clubs bribe judges. But I have never seen a district administrator actively attempt to cover up a student's suicide attempt to protect an insurance payout. They're trying to expel my sister, I said. They gave my parents a contract. If we don't sign it by tomorrow afternoon admitting she did it out of spite, they're handing it over to the police for a felony charge. Sylvie set the papers down and looked out the window of the cafe. She drummed her manicured nails against the laminate table. I interviewed the robotics team this morning, Sylvie said quietly. A boy named Griffin. He told me Felix had been acting erratic, skipping meals, shaking during calibrations. When I asked Dr. Vance about it, he told me it was just performance anxiety. He looked me in the eye and swore the device was completely safe. She turned her gaze back to me. It was cold and terrifyingly sharp. If that boy had died on our stage, the resulting litigation would have cost the university millions, she said. Not to mention the reputational damage. We would have been the institution that paraded a broken, desperate boy out for the cameras until he killed himself in front of an audience. Then you have to tell the school board, I pleaded. You have to tell them you know the truth. If MIT threatens to pull funding or expose them, Drent will back down. They'll drop the charges against Lena. Sylvie picked up her coffee cup, took a slow sip, and set it down. Liam, you are confusing my role here, she said smoothly. I am not a detective, and I am certainly not an advocate for your sister. My only directive is to protect the integrity of the university. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means I am going to draft a report to my superiors outlining gross negligence in the Horizon Tech Engineering Department, Sylvie said. We will permanently sever our recruitment pipeline with this district. We will revoke Dr. Vance's academic affiliations with our lab. The school will quietly lose millions in grant access over the next 5 years. But what about Lena? I cannot involve the university in a local juvenile criminal matter, Sylvie said, opening her laptop back up. I can't go to a school board and accuse them of a cover-up based on a printout of a server ping provided by the accused vandal's brother. It's hearsay. If I put that in writing, Drent will sue me for defamation. The university's legal department would never allow it. So you're just going to leave? I asked, my voice rising loud enough that the table next to us turned to look. You know they're railroading a 17-year-old girl who saved a kid's life, and you're just going to fly back to Boston? I am going to do my job, which is to sever ties with a compromised institution, she said, her tone completely devoid of sympathy. Your sister made a choice to destroy property rather than go to the authorities. She has to navigate the consequences of that choice. I suggest your parents find a very good lawyer. She reached into her tote bag, pulled out a $20 bill, and threw it on the table to cover her lunch. Keep the papers, she said, standing up. They won't do you any good without a subpoena anyway. She walked out of the cafe without looking back. I sat there for 10 minutes, staring at the $20 bill and the folded sheets of paper. The cafe noise buzzed around me, but I couldn't hear any of it. It was the first time in my life I truly understood how the world actually worked. Truth didn't matter. Justice didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was liability and leverage, and we had neither. When I drove back into our neighborhood around 2 in the afternoon, the situation had escalated. There were 3 cars parked along the curb in front of the Kearns' house that didn't belong to the family. One of them was a silver minivan I recognized. It belonged to Paige Aldrich, the vice president of the Horizon Tech PTA. Paige was standing on the Kearns' front lawn. She was holding a smartphone on a small tripod, pointing it at the front porch. Standing on the porch, looking small and fragile in a pale cardigan, was Elena Kern. I parked my Civic in my driveway and got out. I didn't go inside. I walked down to the edge of my lawn and stood by the mailbox, watching them. Paige was talking to the camera. I couldn't hear everything things she was saying, but the tone was unmistakable. That cloying, manufactured empathy that people use when they're performing grief for an audience. A devastating loss for this family. Paige's voice drifted across the hot asphalt. Felix worked so hard to overcome tragedy, only to have his future stolen by a senseless act of teenage jealousy. We are asking the community to come together. The GoFundMe link is in the bio. Let's show Felix that his community stands with him, even when his so-called friends betray him. Elena stood there, her hands clasped in front of her. She nodded slowly when Paige turned the camera toward her. She looked exhausted, her eyes hollow, but she didn't stop it. She was letting Paige sell the lie to everyone in the district. I felt a sudden fiercest urge to walk across the street, kick the tripod into the bushes, and scream the truth at both of them. I wanted to drag Felix out of the house and make him look his mother in the eye and tell her what he had built. But a heavy hand landed on my shoulder, stopping me. I flinched and turned around. It was my dad. He was wearing his work boots and stained jeans, having just gotten home from his shift at the contracting yard. His face was covered in a fine layer of sawdust, and his eyes were dark with a quiet, terrifying anger. "Don't," Dad said softly. "They're live streaming, Dad," I said, pointing at Paige. "She's calling Lena a vandal on the internet right now. They're making money off it." "I know," Dad said. He didn't look across the street. He looked at the front of my Civic. He saw the deep silver scratch running the entire length of the door, and the word freak scrawled in the dust on the window. He walked past me, went into the garage, and came back out with a wet rag. He stood by my car and slowly, methodically, wiped the word off the glass. He didn't say a word while he did it. "I talked to the MIT scout," I told his back. "I found her at a cafe. I showed her the logs. She knows Vance covered it up." Dad stopped wiping. He turned his head. And she doesn't care. She said MIT won't get involved. They're just going to drop the school's accreditation quietly so they don't get sued. She told me we need a lawyer." Dad threw the dirty rag onto the concrete driveway. It landed with a wet smack. He leaned his hands against the roof of my car and hung his head. He looked so old in that moment, the weight of the last 4 days pressing him down into the pavement. "Drent called me an hour ago," Dad said, his voice thick. "He wanted to remind me the deadline to sign the NDA is 4:00 p.m. tomorrow. He also mentioned that if we try to go to the local press with our conspiracy theory about a suicide rig, he will file a civil suit against me for defamation and seek damages equal to the cost of the prosthetic. $22,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. "He can't do that. We don't have 22 grand. "He knows that," Liam, Dad said, finally looking up. "That's the point. He's putting a gun to our heads. Sign the paper, Lena takes the blame, she gets a permanent juvenile record, and we go quietly. Or we fight, we lose the house to legal fees, and Lena goes to trial anyway. What are we going to do?" Dad looked across the street. Paige was packing up her tripod. Elena was walking back into her house, shutting the door tightly behind her. "I don't know," Dad whispered. "I genuinely don't know." I went inside. The house felt like a funeral home. Mom was in the kitchen, aggressively scrubbing the stovetop with a sponge, her eyes red rimmed. She didn't look up when I walked past. I went upstairs to Lena's room. The door was cracked open. I pushed it gently. Lena was sitting on the floor, her back against her bed frame, her knees pulled up to her chest. Her laptop was closed on the desk. She wasn't crying, but she had that distant, hollow look in her eyes. The look of someone who has finally hit the bottom of the well and realized there is no rope coming down. I sat on the floor next to her. The room smelled like stale air and anxiety. "She wouldn't help," I said quietly. "I know," Lena said. "I heard you talking to Dad in the driveway." We sat in silence for a few minutes. From outside, the faint sound of Paige's minivan starting up and driving away echoed through the window glass. "The GoFundMe is over $14,000, Lena said, her voice completely flat. Lena texted me. "People from our middle school are donating. Mrs. Gable, our old science teacher, gave $50. She left a comment saying she was so disappointed in me." "Don't look at it, Lena. Turn the phone off." She rested her chin on her knees. "I ruined our family, Liam. If Dad fights this, Drent is going to bankrupt us. Mom is terrified. You got your car key. And everyone in town thinks I'm a psycho. You saved his life. It doesn't matter," she whispered. "Nobody cares. They just want the story to make sense. And it makes more sense if I'm the villain." She turned her head and looked at me. "Tell Dad to sign the paper tomorrow." "No, we're not doing that." "Liam, tell him to sign it," she insisted, a sudden edge in her voice. "I can take online classes. I can deal with the juvenile record. I'll get an expungement when I'm 18. It's better than losing the house. It's better than Mom having a breakdown. Just let them win. I'm not letting Drent win. It's not a movie, Liam," she snapped, her voice breaking loudly in the quiet room. "The bad guys have all the money and all the lawyers and all the proof. I have a stolen server log that nobody believes. It's over." I didn't have an argument for her. She was right. We were boxed in. I left her room and went downstairs. I felt a sour knot twisting in my gut. I walked out to the back patio and sat in one of the plastic lawn chairs, staring at the overgrown grass by the fence line. The sun started to set, painting the Texas sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. The shadows lengthened across the yard. Around 7:30 p.m., the back gate creaked open. I looked up, expecting to see Dad coming around from the garage. It wasn't Dad. It was Felix. He was wearing the same dark blue hoodie, the empty right sleeve pinned tight against his ribs. He looked terrible. His skin was pale, almost translucent in the fading light, and he had dark, bruised circles under his eyes. He walked slowly, favoring his left leg slightly, moving with a stiff, cautious gait, like he was afraid the ground might open up and swallow him. He stopped at the edge of the patio. He didn't look at me. He looked at the sliding glass door leading into our kitchen. "Is she in there?" he asked. His voice was raw, like he had been screaming or hadn't spoken in days. I stood up, my hands automatically balling into fists. All the anger, the frustration, the fear of the last 4 days suddenly focused entirely on him. "Get off our property," I said. Felix flinched, but he didn't step back. "Liam, please, I need to talk to her." "You don't get to talk to her," I said, taking a step toward him. "Your mother is on the internet right now taking charity money and letting the whole town call my sister a monster. We're about to lose our house because the district lawyer is threatening to sue us to cover up your suicide attempt. So no, you don't get to talk to her. Go back to your house and shut the door. Felix's shoulders slumped. He looked down at the concrete patio. Slowly, clumsily, he reached into the left pocket of his hoodie. He pulled out the green logic board. He held it out toward me. It looked tiny in his palm, fragile and complex. I plugged it into my old diagnostic terminal, Felix whispered, his voice trembling. The one in my closet. The one Dr. Vance didn't know about. I stared at him, not moving. What are you talking about? She didn't just break the housing, Liam, Felix said, looking up at me, his eyes bright with tears. She took a wrench and smashed the main capacitor, but she didn't touch the logic board. She saved the telemetry data. She saved my calibration. I know, I said coldly. She stole it back for you so you wouldn't have to start over. And you thanked her by letting your mom throw her to the wolves. Felix shook his head frantically. No, you don't understand. The diagnostic... It has a continuous sync log. When I plugged the board in to check if the memory was intact, the terminal pulled the error code from the exact millisecond the circuit was broken. He took a shaky breath, stepping closer. The board logged the power surge, he said. It recorded the bypass command. It recorded the exact moment the thermal regulators were shut off. It's hard-coded into the flash memory. It proves the device was rigged to discharge. The sour knot in my stomach suddenly vanished, replaced by a sharp electric jolt of adrenaline. Are you saying you have proof? I asked. Proof that Vance missed it? I have proof of everything, Felix said. He looked at the back door again. But if I give it to you, my mom has to pay back the GoFundMe money. The insurance company won't cover the broken arm. We'll lose our house. He was standing there, a 17-year-old kid missing an arm, holding the only key to my sister's freedom in his remaining hand, asking me to choose between his family's survival and mine. I didn't take the board from him. I just stared at his hand, shaking slightly in the evening air. It's not my choice, I said. It's hers. I turned, walked to the sliding glass door, and slid it open. I stepped into the kitchen, leaving the screen door open so Felix could hear me. Lena, I called out, my voice carrying up the stairs. Come down here. A minute later, I heard her footsteps on the hardwood. She came into the kitchen, stopping when she saw me standing by the open door, and then looking past me to the patio. She walked slowly out onto the concrete. The sun had finally dipped below the fence line, leaving the yard in a deep gray twilight. She looked at Felix, then down at the green logic boards in his hand. What is that? She asked. It's the error log, Felix said, his voice barely above a whisper. From the diagnostic terminal. It recorded the bypass command before you broke the circuit. Lena froze. The hollow, defeated look in her eyes vanished, replaced instantly by the sharp analytical focus I had seen in the garage the night before. She reached out and took the board from his hand. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just traced the edge of it with her thumb. If you use it, Felix said, his voice breaking, Trent can't touch you. They'll have to drop the charges. But my mom, he swallowed hard. She'll have to return the GoFundMe donations. The insurance will deny the claim when they find out what I did. We'll lose the house, Lena. He wasn't fighting her anymore. He was just a terrified kid, completely out of options, handing over the one thing that could destroy his family because he knew it was the right thing to do. Lena looked at him. Then she looked at me. Liam, go get Dad's truck keys, she said. Lena, it's 8 o'clock at night. Drent isn't at the school. I don't want to go to the school, she said, her grip tightening on the logic board. I want to go to Drent's office. He's a partner at the firm downtown. If he's threatening us with a 4 o'clock deadline tomorrow, he's prepping the paperwork tonight. What are you going to do? Felix asked, taking a half step back. I'm going to fix this, Lena said. Both of it. Are you coming with me or not? Felix looked at her, his eyes wide. He nodded once. Dad caught us as we were walking through the living room. I told him we had the proof, and I told him where we were going. He didn't try to stop us. He just put his boots back on, grabbed his keys, and drove us himself. The law firm of Drent, Cahill, and Novak was on the 4th floor of a sleek glass building in the commercial district. The lobby was empty, the security guard half asleep at the desk. Dad signed us in, and we took the elevator up. The firm's reception area was dark, but there was light spilling out from a corner office down the hall. Dad pushed the heavy glass door open. We walked down the carpeted hallway. Soren Drent was sitting behind a massive oak desk, surrounded by stacks of maliciously folders, his suit jacket off and his tie loosened. He looked up, startled, as the 4 of us walked into his office unannounced. What is this? Drent demanded, standing up. You can't just barge in here. If you have the signed agreement, leave it with reception. We don't have the agreement, Dad said, planting his feet firmly on the expensive rug. My daughter has something else in us. Lena walked right up to his desk. She bypassed the leather guest chairs and dropped the green logic board onto the center of his blotter. It landed with a sharp click against the polished wood. Next to it, she placed her phone, the screen glowing with a photograph of the terminal log Felix had taken. That is the primary logic board from the prosthetic, Lena said, her voice steady and completely devoid of fear. It contains a hard-coded error log from the exact moment of the hardware failure. It registers a manual override of the thermal regulators and a closed circuit to the chest sensors. It proves the device was lethal, and it proves Dr. Vance approved a suicide rig. Drent looked down at the board, then at the phone. He didn't panic, but a muscle in his jaw twitched. This is a piece of plastic, Drent said smoothly, and a photograph of text. It proves nothing. I told you, Vance wiped the servers. He wiped the servers, but he didn't wipe my local terminal, Felix spoke up. He stepped out from behind me, his empty sleeve pinned to his hoodie. Drent's eyes darted to him, finally registering who the 4th person in the room was. I built it, Felix said, looking the lawyer dead in the eye. I bypassed the battery. I programmed the heart rate trigger, and I will swear to it in front of a judge, the school board, and the local news. The room went incredibly quiet. The hum of the central air conditioning suddenly felt very loud. Drent looked at Felix, then back at the logic board on his desk. The absolute certainty of his leverage was evaporating right in front of him. You can bully a teenage girl with circumstantial evidence. You cannot bully the disabled victim when he is standing in your office, offering a full confession. If you go public with this, Drent said, his voice dropping into a dangerous, low register. The district's insurance will not pay out a dime for that hardware. Your mother will be liable for the damages, Felix. The district will wash its hands of you. No, they won't, Lena interrupted. Because if this goes public, MIT goes public. Their scout already knows Vance covered it up. She's drafting a report right now to sever ties with Horizon Tech. If the press finds out you tried to blackmail a student to cover up a suicide attempt, Superintendent Ross loses his pension. You lose your contract with the district, and the board gets recalled. Drent sat slowly back down in his leather chair. He steepled his fingers, his eyes calculating, measuring the angles of the trap Lena had just snapped shut around him. What do you want? Drent asked flatly. I want the expulsion dropped immediately, Lena said. I want my record completely cleared. No criminal mischief, no vandalism, no suspensions. I want to walk into class on Monday morning like nothing happened. Done, Drent said. What else? Dr. Vance resigns tomorrow morning, Lena continued. No administrative leave. He quietly retires for personal reasons. Drent nodded slowly. And the hardware? The insurance claim? The Kerns are not taking the blame for Vance's negligence, Lena said, her voice turning to steel. Felix is a minor. The school provided the lab, the equipment, and the faculty supervisor. The district failed to keep him safe. You are going to authorize a quiet settlement to Elena Kern for $25,000 due to the district's failure of oversight regarding the robotics program. The settlement covers the medical debt and the cost of the arm. Drent scoffed, a short, bitter laugh. You want me to write you a check? It's a lot cheaper than the multi-million-dollar lawsuit you'll face if Felix's mother sues the district for letting her son build an electric chair in your classroom, Dad said, stepping forward. 25 grand. You drop the papers right now, or we walk out of here, and Felix posts that terminal log to the PTA Facebook page. Drent stared at my dad. He looked at Felix. He looked at Lena. He saw exactly what we saw. They had lost. The district's entire defense rested on Felix being a victim of Lena's jealousy. With Felix flipping the script, the narrative collapsed. Drent pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and picked up his pen. I will have the settlement agreement and the disciplinary expungement drafted by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, Drent said, not looking up. You sign the non-disclosure regarding the suicide attempt. We pay the settlement. Elena Kern takes down the GoFundMe and returns the donations. We'll be here at 8, Dad said. Lena reached out, picked up her phone, and grabbed the green lodging note off the desk. She dropped it back into her pocket. We walked out of the office, leaving Soren Drent sitting alone in the dark. The ride home was quiet, but it wasn't the suffocating, terrifying quiet we had lived in for the last 4 days. It was the quiet of a fever finally breaking. The heavy, crushing weight had been lifted off the roof of Dad's truck. When we pulled into the cul-de-sac, it was pitch black outside. Dad parked the truck in the driveway. We got out. Felix stood on the asphalt for a moment, looking across the street at his house. The porch light was on. He turned to Lena. Thank you, he said. It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't a tearful reconciliation. It was just 2 words, heavy and exhausted, but entirely real. Tell your mom to check her email tomorrow morning, Lena said, her hands shoved deep into her sweatshirt pockets. And tell her to take that stupid video down. Felix managed a small, tired smile. I will. He turned and walked back across the street. We watched him go inside, the heavy front door clicking shut behind him. By Friday afternoon, the storm had completely passed. The GoFundMe disappeared from the community page without an explanation. Paige Aldrich quietly deleted her video. Superintendent Ross sent an email to the entire district announcing Dr. Vance's sudden and immediate retirement. Lena's suspension was formally lifted, erased from the digital portal as if it had never existed. The rumor mill spun for a few more days, confused by the sudden lack of oxygen. But without Elena or Paige feeding it, people quickly lost interest and moved on to the next minor suburban drama. We didn't talk about it, we just let it fade. On Saturday morning, I was in the driveway, using a bottle of rubbing compound and a buffer to try and work the deep key scratch out of the side of my Civic. The sun was hot, baking the back of my neck. I heard the sound of a garage door opening across the street. I looked up. Felix was standing in his driveway. The Green City bulk trash dumpster was gone. His garage was clean, the floor swept, the plastic bins of components neatly stacked against the back wall. He wasn't throwing anything away. I watched as Lena walked out of our front door. She was carrying her black canvas backpack. She didn't look at me, and she didn't hesitate. She walked straight across the hot asphalt, up the driveway, and stepped into Felix's garage. Felix pulled up a second overturned bucket for her to sit on. She dropped her backpack, unzipped it, and pulled out a breadboard, a soldering iron, and a tangle of copper wire. He couldn't use his right arm, and she didn't have the engineering background he did. But as I watched them lean over the workbench together, arguing quietly about voltage loads and sensor lag, I knew it didn't matter. They were going to build a better hand.